what was the general state of education in Nepal? Let's take a point 10 years back before you got involved.
Yeah.
What was it like? How many schools were there? How many students used to get enrolled? How many made it past grade 8? What was the situation like?
So my journey into education started right after I returned back from United World College. So I had finished that. And I worked with a bunch of friends to establish Nepal's first free private schools.
Mm-hmm.
Now, back then, my understanding of the problem was very naive, which I thought the government education system was really terrible. So let's create private education that delivers for everybody. Me being naive, I didn't realize private education it couldn't be free, if that makes sense, because the state wouldn't give you money to ensure that people were staying in school. So we created a model where we would barter education for labor. So if you had a child, you would come to my school, but you would work 2 to 3 days a month in my school farm, and the school farm income would support the school. Now, the model, as beautiful as it sounds on the outside, as the number of students increase, the size of the farm would have had to increase as well.
Yeah.
And that's investment again. So as a 17-year-old understanding the state of education, which my understanding, again, repeating, that everything private is great, and that anything public is bad, was very flawed. I worked in the enterprise for 3 years with my co-founders, and then we fell out, which normally happens with startups and up-and-coming companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bounced off. I decided that I would continue on a journey that's different. I came to the US. I was studying on a scholarship at College of the Atlantic. And every day there was this, back then Facebook had just become a thing. Yeah. So going on Facebook, I sort of realized people were talking about so many problems in Nepal. People were talking about problems of roads, because we were just a sort of a young republic, a democratic republic. And back, everybody that we stayed or lived outside, studied outside, worked outside, we used to see the country from far, and we thought contributing to problems in Nepal was talking about the problems.
Yeah.
And as I saw through it, people talked, wrote status about the state of drinking water, the state of transport, and whatnot. And I asked myself, and I talked about education, and I asked myself, why am I even talking about problems? That's when it really haunted me, which is, I don't think I'm the kind of person that would really talk about problems. I like decoding problems. And that's when I reflected back on my journey of building Nepal's first free private schools, and asked myself, I really actually hadn't decoded the problem. 10 years ago, if 100 children enrolled in grade 1 of any given school, on an average, across the field, private and government, then there would only be around 18 people that would stay on to survive beyond grade 8. That's the number we're really talking about. Fast forward to 2016, 17, and even 2021, if 100 children of the same enrolled, there would be 38 that would remain on to go into secondary education. So we've actually doubled the number. But at what cost? What's the problem? State education is sort of very failed. The government doesn't provide enough teachers, not because it doesn't have the capacity to provide, but because the system in itself is pretty flawed to, equally divide the number of teachers, select them and provide them. Those are two different stories, right? The investment in education is at around 13% of GDP, which in many ways for a developing country should be at 20%. You're not necessarily having to spend on defense. Considering you're a country that is landlocked, there's China and there's India, you'd rather spend on education than on defense, right? But still, defense tops education. When you need a country that would be prosperous, you want to be increasing investments in something that creates that prosperity and also creates human resource and creates people that can actually imagine the prosperity, right? So 13% of GDP gets invested into education, should be 20%. But interestingly, of the 13%, majority goes to secondary education. Now, that's a very big problem. If you thought of it, 62 have already left school, 38 remain. The 38 would have remained. And so the 38% receive majority of the investment to become better professionals. Now, it would be contradictory to what I just said a while ago, which is I just want 100 people to, become those leaders and everything. But what I'm also saying back then was I want to give equal opportunity for everybody to succeed. If we're really talking about free, fair, universal primary education, then investment in free, fair, universal primary education should be the priority. Imagine if you had 90 people go into secondary education. Now that would make sense to invest 90% of the education budget into secondary education. The reason I say the problems are, yes, it starts at the root, which is kindergarten, 100 children enroll, grade 8, you got 38 remaining, and they go on to secondary education. Investment-wise, if you analyze the problem, looking at the primary education space, if you invested and put in a lot of money, you would get a higher return because there are more children. Now, you moved on to the secondary education, you put in a lot of money, the lot of money is delivering returns, but interestingly, if you flip the chart, it would be the 62% actually support and sustain the whole of Nepal economy. They actually drive the 32% remittance industry, that we have for us to sustain. So let's say they were still going to go to remittance. But now imagine where if these children were to go into secondary education, all of them have some sort of skill and then go to remittance, which is work in Saudi, Dubai with some skills, then our remittance would increase, right? So the benefits of actually putting people through primary into secondary and then letting secondary first for now thrive on its own has a higher return. So the problem is not only in children drop out, but also that the investment is very unequal. And so therefore doesn't allow for children to have an equal playing field. The other thing is the curriculum is outdated, right? We've been using a 1976 curriculum, as far as I know. I could be completely wrong on this one, but 1976 curriculum. Dude, we're in the 21st century. For God's sake, it doesn't take a lot of effort to realize that a landlocked country should be investing a lot into education and specifically in technology education, because you don't need to use land to create technology industries. Look at New Zealand. It's literally thrived on technology. Yes, it's not landlocked, but it's sea-locked. It's far away from everybody, and it's got similar contexts like us. We've been so focused on not considering education as a mainstream thing that our teachers are not updated. The training they are provided is once a year, 1 day, and sometimes throughout the year, 1-2 days, and they're expected to deliver the highest standard education. And so therefore the state education, which is where majority of the poor children attend, are not catered to. They're not provided the kind of education that most private schools would deliver to children that can afford. And so the level playing field is never going to be created if we don't make the right investments in primary education. That's where we come in. That's where I come in and say, if we have enough models to showcase that investing in the space we are talking about, and if we actually showcase people that actually go into secondary education and do better than what they would have done, looking at control cases and implement cases, voila, we would encourage the government to invest more. And honestly saying, when I talk about investments, there are, a few things that have to receive investment. Curriculum is something we can't really influence a lot because at the end of the day, it's set by the national government. I just wish the 38 people that control, when I say 38 people, 62 people leave primary education, 38 remain. Of the 38, majority of them go on to lead the government and the country. They are the people deciding for the 62% that leave schools. They are the people that have the possibility of transforming education for everybody, deciding on policies, deciding on budget, deciding on everything, right? Them having that investment in secondary education should oblige them to think properly, morally, and decide the right things. So investing in teachers, investing in right kind of infrastructure for children and women. It is important that teachers are looked after. What if you had the highest paid teachers in Nepal? What if teaching profession was one of the highest paid profession in Nepal instead of, I don't know, a civil servant? I don't know, maybe a military person. What if the teachers were, they were badass respected, right? And what if teachers were provided any tools and every tools and resources they would ask for in order to deliver on the commitment to education, right? These are all what if questions, but these are questions that could literally be answered overnight. And it's just about allocating the right kind of people, right kind of resources into it.